Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Revolution Evolution. I am your host, Gregory, with Revolution Evolution. And tonight we're going to be going over um, some something to do with big oil and what they are asking of the U.S. Supreme Court to get in and interfere with reinstatement of offshore drilling off the coast of California in a lot of these areas there. And I have a good article on this. And in a time when we need to be moving away from fossil fuels to over to alternative forms of energy, whether it be hemp fuels or whether it be hydrogen fuels, which they could take even in the oceans and desalinate the water and extract the hydrogen there. And they could be taking and selling the salt and all that. So we've got oceans filled with water that could be of great use. So I'm going to kick y'all off tonight with the first article, and this is on, and this is a Common Dreams article by a Kenny Stansel. And they are asking, and this is Big Oil asks U.S. Supreme Court to reinstate offshore fracking in California. The decision to halt fracking was exceedingly well reasoned, and I hope the court rejects the oil industry's reckless attempt to overturn the Ninth Circuit's ruling, said one campaigner. The American Petroleum Institute and a pair of oil companies filed a petition for certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday in a bid to overturn a lower federal court ruling that blocked fracking in public waters off of California's coast. The decision to halt fracking was exceedingly well reasoned, and I hope the court rejects the oil industry's reckless attempt to overturn the Ninth Circuit's ruling. Kristen Motzel, Ocean's legal director at the Center for Biological Diversity, said in a statement, "Fracking is dangerous to whales, sea otters, and other marine life, and this dirty, harmful technique has no place in our ocean." CBD and the Wistoyo Foundation sued the Trump administration to stop offshore fracking in 2016. Then California Attorney General Kamala Harris filed a similar case. In 2018, U.S. District Judge Philip S. Gutierrez ordered a prohibition on permits for offshore fracking in federal waters off California, ruling that the U.S. Department of Interior had failed to adhere to multiple federal laws. A three-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld Gutierrez's decision last June, arguing that the DOI violated the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Coastal Zone Management Act when it allowed fracking in offshore and gas wells in all leased public waters off California. In late August, the Biden administration, of which Harris is the vice president, asked the Ninth Circuit for an en banc review to overturn the panel's ruling. The Biden administration's request, which drew the ire of environmentalists because it would have enabled offshore fracking to resume. And in this quote, which is very, very, very true, fracking is dangerous to whales, sea otters, and other marine life, and this dirty, harmful technique has no place in our oceans. In its June ruling, the Ninth Circuit stated that the DOI should have prepared a full environmental impact statement in light of the unknown risks posed by the whales, stimulation treatments, and other significant data gaps that the agencies acknowledged. Instead, the agency disregarded necessary caution when dealing with the unknown effects of the well stimulation treatments and the data gaps associated with a program of regular fracking offshore California in order to increase production and to extend well life, the Ninth Circuit wrote. The panel's decision prevents the DOI from issuing fracking permits until it completes Endangered Species Act consultations and published an environmental impact statement that fully and fairly evaluates all reasonable alternatives. In addition to the fact that offshore fracking increases planet-wrecking greenhouse gas emissions, tens of millions of gallons of toxic wastewater have been dumped into the ocean since 2010. According to CBD scientists, at least 10 chemicals routinely used in offshore fracking could kill or harm a broad variety of marine species, including sea otters, fish, leatherback turtles, and whales. Now, this here is the petition right here from, and I won't go too far into that, and that's who's all involved there, a whole host of names of individuals. But yeah, I think this is a bad decision right here to be going off of right here. And this here's another article right here, which is the same thing, where the oil industry seeks Supreme Court review of California offshore fracking ban, which the Ninth Circuit refused previous request, upheld lower court's decision. From Washington, the American Petroleum Institute and two oil companies filed a petition for certiorari with the U.S. Supreme Court today, seeking a review of a lower court decision that halted offshore fracking in federal waters off California. A previous request by the Biden administration to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for en-banc review of the ruling was denied.
So, Greg?
Yeah.
It's certiorari.
Oh, certiorari. Yeah, thank you.
For certiorari.
Yeah, thank you. The decision to halt fracking was exceedingly well reasoned, and right here it also says pretty much what I've said before as well, but we do need to take action and be sure that no other offshore fracking happens. And I was shared something interesting earlier, and this was told to me by Cora Emanuel. and this is even from New York State. And he says that he noticed where he lives on Long Island, where the rich folks will buy up all the beaches and all that, and they will work. They become fierce environmentalists when it comes to only their areas. And then he said the rich folks banned offshore drilling on Long Island because they think it looks ugly and it'll bring their property values down.
Of course.
And he also states the rich folks also bought up 99% of Long Island's beaches and left the scraps for the public as public beaches. But yeah, they'll turn into fierce environmentalists when it comes to their own benefit, but when it comes to our benefit, the hell with us.
Okay, so maybe the thing to do is to sell them all of the public beach land, sell that all to the private sector. And then the year after we sell it to the private sector, then we go in and we appropriate it.
Yep.
We expropriate it then.
But yeah, what they're asking the Supreme, but yeah, what they are, and this right here, them knowing the risks of what it does to the land and everything. And right here in this other article about this, the Ninth Circuit's original ruling found that by allowing fracking from all active oil and gas leases in federal waters off California, the federal government themselves has violated the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and the Coastal Zone Management Act. The Ninth Circuit stated that the Interior should have prepared a full environmental impact statement in light of the unknown risks posed by the well stimulation treatments. So there's a lot going on here to unpack.
Right, and evidently a lot that was illegal besides.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with this last small paragraph that fracking wastewater is often discharged directly into the ocean. And you've got to also think about all that waste that is being dumped into the oceans and how much animal life is at stake here. Like here a few years back, even here off the coast down around Brunswick, Georgia, or somewhere down there, there was like an overturned oil tanker that overturned. You probably remember hearing about that.
Yes.
And it made a mess, especially around the areas of Jekyll Island and St. Simon's Island.
Jekyll Island, yeah. Yeah, the monster from Jekyll Island of the Federal Reserve.
And it was this was actually it. This here's and I'm gonna go over this. And this here's an article from the NPR, even though I don't agree with them because they're very much so mainstream media nowadays. And this is what I was just talking about. Like, this is off the coast right here in Georgia. The cargo ship in Georgia leaked oil even into marshlands after overturning. And you can see the oil tanker right here.
Yeah.
And a Moran tugboat nears the stern of the vessel Golden Ray as it lays on its side in Jekyll Island, Georgia, where the ship is capsized. And it also says the Golden Ray cargo ship was also carrying new cars as well. And there was like a lot of oil even on that ship. So it was a multi-purpose ship, oil tanker, and they was carrying cars.
So now a lot of cars will be put on the market
No, they're
that fell off the tanker.
and this is just crazy. We don't need any future oil and gas leases. We don't need coal mines, especially in like what they're doing in Germany, where they are taking action right now, and they have arrested climate activists there. And Greta Thunberg was one of the climate activists that was arrested at the coal mine. That's when she was carried off by 4 or 5 German police officers. And like the other night show, we don't need the coal mines right there off the coast in the UK either.
So it took 4 or 5 German police officers to carry off this little girl.
Yeah. Why? These big bad men. And it's just crazy. We don't need to dig for more coal. We don't need to drill for more oil. We need to be moving toward alternative forms of energy to address the climate crisis that could have been at our front door for years now. And this also brings me to the next article. And it's also from Common Dreams, my favorite site of all time now. I'm addicted to Common Dreams. And this is this Joe Biden and Secretary Deb Haaland. They're speaking at the White House there. And this is also another article from Kenny Stansel. And this here is a spectacular failure of climate leadership. And Biden has outpaced Trump on oil and gas permits. Avoiding catastrophic climate change requires phasing out fossil fuel extraction. But instead, we're still racing in the opposite direction, said one environmental justice advocate. Although President Joe Biden vowed on the campaign trail to phase out federal leasing for fossil fuel extraction, his administration approved more permits for oil and gas drilling on public lands in its first 2 years than the Trump administration did in 2017 and 2018. According to the Center for Biological Diversity's analysis on federal lands released Wednesday, the Biden White House greenlit 6,430 permits. Yes, you read that correctly. 6,430 permits for oil and gas drilling on public lands in 2021 and 2022. A 4.2% increase over former President Donald Trump's administration, which rubber stamped 6,172 drilling permits in its first 2 years. So we see which administration was better for the environment.
Well, that was because you had the other side then was screaming out.
Yeah. And you have this administration now that is also controlled by the same industries. And like Madeline said earlier in our show with Around the World with Brandy and Dee, we have ping pong politics where we're
Yes, we do.
thrown back and forth between red and blue, red and blue.
And well, what we do is uh, we throw ourselves. In other words, we throw ourselves. First, we elect one party, and of course, they never do anything for us, so they're going to piss us off.
Yeah.
And
We
that's
need
why
to throw in
the other
a green ping pong ball.
we need to throw the Uni Party out. Both
Mhm.
wings of the Uni Party out. And that
Yeah, and
means,
then we can have climate justice.
yes, and that means that if we're dissatisfied with one wing of the Uni Party, we have to understand that we're still dissatisfied with the Uni Party and we can't vote for the other wing because they're not
Exactly.
going to be any better.
Of
Exactly.
of the drilling authorized by the Biden administration, nearly 4,000 permits have been approved for public lands in New Mexico, followed by 1,223 in Wyoming, and several hundred in each Utah, Colorado, California, Montana, and North Dakota. According to the Center for Biological Diversity, these Biden approved drilling permits will result in more than 800 million tons of estimated equivalent greenhouse gas pollution. Yes, you read that. Yeah, that we read that correctly. 800 million, just what we need, or the annual climate pollution from about 217 coal fire powered plants.
Mm.
Just last week, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres told the elites gathered at the World Economics Forum in Davos that fossil fuel producers and their enablers are still racing to expand production, knowing full well that their business model is inconsistent with human survival. Well, it's not only the fossil fuels industry, it's not only their business model that's inconsistent, it's also the military industrial complex's business model, which is inconsistent with human survival. So we have two industries there that are leading the charge that are causing climate change. They're wrecking our planet. Reams of scientific evidence show that pollution from the world's existing fossil fuel developments is enough to push temperature rise well beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre industrial baseline, averting calamitous levels of global heating necessities, ending investments in new oil and gas projects, and phasing out extraction to keep 40% of the fossil fuel reserves at currently operational sites underground. As a presidential candidate, Biden pledged to ban new oil and gas leases on public lands and waters and to require federal permitting decisions to weigh the social costs of additional planet heating pollution. Although Biden issued an executive order suspending new fossil fuel leasing during his first week in office, his administration's actions since then have been roughshod over earlier promises, worsening the deadly climate crisis that the White House claims to be serious about mitigating. The president and the Interior and Secretary both have the power to avoid a climate catastrophe, but they need to change course rapidly. Looks like they're condoning the climate catastrophe if you really want to know the truth. The U.S. Department of Interior argued on August 24th of 2021 that it was required to resume lease auctions because of a preliminary injunction issued by U.S. Judge Terry A. Doughty, a Trump appointee who ruled in favor of a group of big oil funded Republican attorney generals that sued Biden over his moratorium. In a memorandum of opposition filed on the same day, however, the U.S. Department of Justice asserted that while Doughty's decision prevented the Biden administration from implementing its pause, it did not compel the DOI to hold new lease sales, let alone on the urgent timeline specified in the plaintiff's contempt motion. Just days after the Biden called global warming an existential threat to human existence and declared Washington's ostensible commitment to decarbonize at the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow. The DOI ignored the DOG's legal advice and proceeded with lease sale 257, the nation's largest ever offshore auction, which saw more than 80 million acres of the Gulf of Mexico offered to the highest bidding oil and gas giants, was blocked in January 2022 by a federal judge who wrote that the Biden administration violated environmental laws by not adequately according to the likely consequences of resulting emissions. Despite Biden's pledge to cut U.S. greenhouse gas pollution in half by the end of this decade, the DOI's Bureau of Land Management held lease sales in several Western states in 2022, opening up tens of thousands of acres of public land to fossil fuel production. The DOI has so far announced plans for 3 new onshore oil and gas lease sales in 2023. The first will offer more than 261,200 acres of public land in Kansas, Nebraska, New Mexico, and Wyoming to the highest bidding drillers. The second and third will put a total of 95,411 acres of public land in Nevada and Utah on the auction block.
My God.
So there are a bunch of hypocrites up there. Say one thing, do another. That's why we need to dump the corruption. In addition, do what?
I said, you bet. They say one thing and they do another, and they say another, and they do yet another. It's just,
they don't know what the hell they're doing.
They're completely inconsistent. They're driven by the short-term pressure. They have no plan. They have no vision.
And the only one with a vision was Jill Stein and Ajamu Baraka in 2016. And their vision was very clear to tackle the climate crisis.
Oh, yes. They had a very clear platform.
The president's 2021 freeze on new lease auctions was meant to give the DOI time to analyze the potential climate and other impacts associated with oil and gas activities on public land or in offshore waters. Nevertheless, the agency's long awaited review of the federal leasing program effectively ignored the climate crisis, instead, proposing adjustments to royalties, bids, and bonding in what environmental justice campaigners described as a shocking capitulation to the needs of the corporate polluters. The U.S. Geological Survey has estimated that roughly 25% of the country's total carbon dioxide emissions and 7% of its overall methane emissions can be attributed to fossil fuel extraction on public lands and waters. According to peer-reviewed research, a nationwide prohibition on federal oil and gas leasing would slash carbon emissions by 280 million tons per year. And now what they're doing is going to almost triple that per year, making it even worse. And I think it was pointed out to me, I think I saw it was posted by Brian Rosser from here in Georgia, that if the carbon pollutants was more than 400 parts per million, then we're at a point of no return. And I'd like to see another analysis on what the carbon is at now. The Biden administration has not enacted any policies significantly limiting drilling permits or manage a decline of production to avoid a 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. The Center for Biological Diversity lamented. The White House even supported the demands of right-wing Democrat Senator Joe Manchin. Holy crap. We all know what Joe Manchin's up to. He's a coal baron.
Yeah, he's looking for more deals for himself.
Exactly. Congress's leading recipient of the fossil fuel industry, cash, and longtime coal profiteer, to add provisions to the Inflation Reduction Act that will lock in fossil fuel leasing for the next decade. So, yeah, this is Joe Manchin looking after his own financial portfolio right here. On numerous occasions, including earlier this month, progressive lawmakers and advocacy groups have implored the Biden administration to use its executive authority to phase out oil and gas production on public lands and in offshore waters. A petition submitted last year, equipped with a regulatory framework to wind down oil and gas production by 98% by 2035. And it doesn't look like they're going to even meet that at the rate they're going. Like, they're backpedaling like crazy. According to the coalition that drafted it, the White House can achieve this goal by using long dormant provisions of the Mineral Leasing Act, Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, and the National Emergencies Act. The President and Interior Secretary have the power to avoid a climate catastrophe, but they need to change course rapidly, McKinnon said Wednesday. Strong executive action can meet the climate emergency with the urgency it demands, starting with phasing out fossil fuel production on public lands and waters. And this here is from the Center of Biological Diversity. And I thought it was like very good to add. And this here is from like Taylor McKinnon. And they are talking about how the Biden administration's oil and gas drilling approvals well outpaced Trump. And the massive fossil fuel expansion undermines U.S. climate. And this is from Washington. And the federal data shows that the Biden administration has approved 6,430 permits for oil and gas drilling on public lands in its first 2 years. So Joe Biden seriously is not upholding to his end of the deal when he said that he was going to meet all of these climate goals and such. Like he's a total freaking hypocrite.
He is. He's always been a hypocrite, Joe Biden.
He's a liar.
He's a
He's always been a liar.
pathological liar.
He's always been a barefaced liar.
And I think somebody, even from the left of Bernie, needs to primary his ass.
Well, yeah, because Bernie won't do it.
Well, I think people are tired of that. I don't think Bernie has the support. People just saw twice what happened. So I think there needs to be a new person.
Yes, I think so too.
Somebody like, I think Marianne Williamson would be a perfect one.
There was an interesting tweet today. Okay, it was by Brandy, actually. It related to Marianne Williamson. Here, let me find it. Okay, I answered it, but
Oh, about her being pro-Zionism?
no, it wasn't about being pro-Zionism. It was, though she might have said that because that's true. In other words, that's been one of Marianne's problems. Okay, Brandy said, "I will not be supporting
Oh,
Marianne
yeah, I read that.
nor anyone else running in either major party for 2024. Just another person trying to lead sheep back to a corrupt party and system." So I quote tweeted that and I said, "I may vote for her if she passes the dump the corruption litmus test, but I won't vote for anyone who doesn't. It's not about party, it's about being bought." Okay, well, I'm bought.
Exactly. And it's going to take somebody like even, I think Ajamu Baraka would be a perfect president.
I haven't studied him really closely enough. I mean, I know that he had a good platform. Each time I hear him speak, I'm favorably impressed. But I haven't tried to get into all the details of his life.
Yeah.
And you'll have the people that went after Bernie going after him. And especially you'll have the good old Israeli lobby and a whole bunch of them going after Jomu Baraka.
Well, that's going to be true for any candidate who takes popular positions on various issues.
Right.
In other words, so he's not the only one they're going to go after. The problem is the same and the solution is the same. If we neuter their money by voting against the candidates who accept that money, then what can they do?
Exactly. And the thing is, it scares me about climate change, and something that not many people are talking about is the vast climate migration that's going to happen. Like there's going to be a massive climate migration, whether we know it or not. Like people getting further inland away from the coastlines. And
absolutely.
And you see states like Florida, which almost every hurricane site every summer, like when hurricane season is in here, you see the states like Florida, you see the nations in the Caribbean like Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, even Puerto Rico, Antigua and Barbuda, and all the others. And you're even seeing Guam and Hawaii. Eventually, the people of Hawaii, if we are not careful with the climate crisis, if we're not, the people of Hawaii may find themselves living on the U.S. mainland or either all parts of Australia. And that's one thing that a lot of people are not waking up to, that there is going to be a massive immigration crisis. If they just think the immigration crisis that we're faced with today because of how bad things is in Central and South America, if they think this is bad, just wait until 30, 40, 50 years from now when people are migrating to the U.S. mainland to get further inland away from the coastlines. It's going to be substantially worse if we don't walk away, abolish fossil fuels altogether, whether it be coal, gasoline, and all that. Like we can phase that out within 2 years by, like I live in a rural community, and I've been in and around many rural communities that do have industrial parks. Like we could take in these industrial parks, like with one bill in Congress, well, maybe maybe two bills to Congress. One could be a farm bill to subsidize the farmers to start the industrial hemp growth, to growing in hemp on an industrial scale, which we would see vast amounts of carbon. And there's still some smog around some of the cities. You would see a drastic reduction in the smog, even in the air. And we can also start doing subsidizing new companies to go into these rural communities and put maybe in my town put a hemp oil extraction mill up, and then in the next town over put like a refining mill plant up, which refines the hemp fuel into either like a fuel to burn in our cars, like gasoline, diesel fuel for semi trucks, heavy agricultural and other heavy equipment and all that. And there's also desalination of ocean water to get the hydrogen out of the water needed for hydrogen fuels. Like there's those two sources of fuels, and we have oceans filled with water that could easily be beneficial, and we can probably reverse sea level rise that way. Like we need to do something to reverse the course of sea level rise to keep these communities from being at risk. Like we seriously need to do something.
We need to do something, and the problem always comes back to the corporations and corporate profit.
Well, those same corporations could profit off of hemp fuels and hydrogen fuels, along with solar, wind, geothermal, tidal wave, and all of that. Like we have so many, the same corporations can get out of fossil fuels and get into environmentally friendly, sustain alternative forms of energy. Like they'll still make money, but they will not be harming the planet any further. Yeah,
I know what you're saying, and I guess they're looking at it through their profit margin.
exactly, and they can still profit off of hemp fuels, hydrogen fuels, the and the other industry that profits off of the climate crisis is the paper and lumber industries. Like they could be transitioning the paper industry over to hemp fiber, and
Right.
they can also make building materials from hemp fiber. And the hemp fiber grows. You could probably take right here in the Southeast United States and grow 2 or 3 hemp crops per year on the same land. You could take even, let's talk about Ukraine for a minute. And especially with how the wars go, you could take war torn Ukraine. You end that war altogether. And if you want to revitalize the soil after all those bombs impacted a lot of the soil there, hemp would revitalize all that soil, and it will decontaminate the soil there in war-torn Ukraine. And I can support that if it's for the sake of our environment.
Right.
Even a country like Ukraine can benefit from hemp.
Yes, they could. It's just
And they,
the problem is, like we always say, we have to dump the corruption. And even and this is a major issue right now, what you're talking about. It needs to be done ASAP. And these corporations just
don't care.
exactly, that's the key word. They don't care.
And talking about the climate migration, I have another article from Common Dreams right here. And this is about the climate crisis, which is making millions too poor to even escape the climate crisis. And this is another issue right here is poverty, which is making it impossible for the poor to even escape.
Yes.
And this article is from a Brett Wilkins.
Yeah, Brett Wilkins is one of their regular correspondents.
Ongoing climate change is keeping many people in the global south in poverty, making it more difficult for them to migrate, said the co-author of a new study. Thus, climate change deprives people of an important way to adapt to its impacts and increases the gap between the rich and poor. As the worsening climate emergency creates an increasing number of migrants around the world, the economic effects of the planetary crisis are paradoxically making millions of people throughout the global south too poor to escape its ravages. According to a study published by the in the journal Environmental Research Letters, researchers from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany. Climate change reduces economic growth in almost all countries around the world, but it has a very divergent effects in poorer and richer countries. Study co-author Jacob Shuey said Monday, overall migration related to climate change has increased, but it has done so to a lesser extent than might have been expected. The reason is bitter. In poor countries, many people are in need are lacking the means to migrate. They have no choice but to stay where they are. And this here's a really good tweet from the Potsdam Institute, and I have shared it over on the Revolution Evolution Twitter account. And you can see right here where they're saying stuck. And it's a sad reality. Co-author Christian Otto noted that the economic growth affects national level income levels, which in turn affect migration. Relatively, a few people migrate from a high income and from very low income countries. In this case, in the case of poor countries, this is partly because many people simply cannot afford to leave. So very poor often stay in their home country, even if they are in need or would like to migrate for other reasons. And that's countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, many of the Southeast Asian countries in the global South,
In
these
many of
island
the African
nations.
countries.
Yeah.
Mm.
Another study co-author, Anders Leverman, said that ongoing climate change is keeping many people in the global South in poverty, making it more difficult for them to migrate. Thus, climate change deprives people of an important way to adapt to its impacts and increases the gap between the rich and poor. According to a 2017 study by the British medical journal, The Lancet, climate change could create 1 billion refugees by 2050. And that's what I was saying earlier. You just think the climate crisis at the border is worse now. Just wait until 2050, 2060. It's going to be a hell of a lot worse. Other studies conclude the number could be even higher. Additionally, the World Bank says the planetary emergency could displace more than 200 million people within their home countries by mid-century.
Oh, I think that's a low estimate. Very
I
low.
think that's a very low estimate. And I'm going to send this article over to Fadl Kaboub, who has conducted many studies on the impacts of the global South, because I think this is something else that he could read up on. So I'm sending that over to Fadl Kaboub so he could read up on that portion of how bad it is in the global South in terms of the climate emergency.
Yeah, I expect he already knows that.
Yeah, one thing, like I said earlier, we just think the climate crisis caused by foreign policy choices in Central and South America are bad now. We think the immigration crisis is bad now. Just wait till 2050, 2060 and see just how much worse it's going to be because of the impacts of sea level rise, swallowing whole countries and it would turn the UK, which is already an island country, it would turn it into an archipelago. And the Philippines is currently an archipelago right now. It would make it non-existent by at least the 22nd century. And we've got to do something now to reverse that sea level rise. Whether it be through filtering out the salt to turn the water into hydrogen fuels. And we can also desalinate the water and solve the drinking water crisis in Africa. Like, there's many endless possibilities we can do. We can help desalinate water to get water to crops in inland Africa and clean drinking water into those places, because water is life. And to address what Steve Wolfbrand just said, Sandy could help a lot. Invite her to your show. I would love no more than to get Sandy on my show. I would have to schedule my show at an earlier time so she can make it. And I would love to go on her show one of these evenings. That would be a very cool show to go on. And as the Environmental Coffee House said right here, oh, hi, Sandy. She said no one cares, or at least the psychopaths at the helm don't, which is very true. And she also says if this war didn't read out, would the U.S. be approving all these permits? No, they would not. And yes, I agree, Deb Haaland is corrupt. And they want to put a fossil fuel magnate in charge of the COP28. We are truly effed. Yeah, I agree. But yeah, we've got to do something to address this climate crisis. And if Sandy's still there listening, I would love to join her show one of these evenings. That would be very fun. But yeah, the only way we're going to solve this climate crisis, and this does come down to the litmus test.
It does come down to dump the incumbents, sure.
It's going to have to come down to dumping the corruption in politics. And if these fossil fuel companies are taking the big money, then they do not. I mean, if these politicians are taking the big money from the fossil fuel companies, then they are to be dumped effective immediately. And that's why we need candidates calling out the corruption from within. We need them, especially from the fossil fuel industry. And this is also going to cause a global health crisis as well.
The fossil fuel companies are also very active in the super PAC area.
I'd love to conduct an analysis on who the fossil fuel companies donate money to. And those are the ones that we're going to have to dump. Starting with Joe Manchin up in West Virginia, since he is only in Congress to line his own wallets and expand on his own portfolio. I don't know who we can get up there. I think Richard Ojeda would be the best bet.
He was gone. He went to North Carolina, I believe, or South Carolina.
Who, Richard Ojeda?
Yeah, Richard Ojeda, yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes, he left West Virginia. Lana Dell had been in touch with him some time ago. And she found that he wanted to move out, of West Virginia. And that his target seemed to be North Carolina. And I believe he did go.
Yeah, he would have been an excellent choice because he was very much so for the Green New Deal. Or maybe even somebody else that would be good in that position would be Paula Jean Swearengin.
Yes, I think Paula Jean Swearengin is a bit at sea because she wasn't able to break the hold of Joe Manchin, on the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party beat her twice.
Yeah, because of the big money that Joe Manchin takes in from the PACs and the super PACs and
yes,
the donors.
And the mobilization of PACs and super PACs against her.
And what she should do is run. I'm looking at the Green Party website to see where they currently have, because if she can run as a Green, then she could get on the ballot there.
If she wants to get on the ballot there, she'd probably have to run as an independent, don't you think?
Yeah, I think she should run against Joe Manchin and knock him out.
Well, she still wouldn't have any money. Her only chance to knock him out if she ran as an independent is if we can make our movement successful, so that by
Mhm.
2024 there'll be very few people in West Virginia who'll vote for Joe Manchin.
Oh, I do have good news to share on that in regards to the Green Party. They do, in fact, have, and this, I'm going to share this screen real quick on the Green Party while we're at it.
Okay.
And this here, all of the state, you see West Virginia?
Yeah.
She could easily run as a Green up there. Get on the ballot as a Green, since they do have ballot access for 2024.
Oh, that is good news.
So this is very good news to run candidates in all of these states highlighted in green as candidates. But yeah, and we're working on it in Georgia. There's Alaska, South Dakota. There's even Indiana, Kansas, Oklahoma, New York that is building. That's like legal action right now. So if we can get if we can get Paula J. Swearingen elected as a Green,
Bless you. Thank you.
Bless you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
But yeah, we do need to get the Green. If she ran as a Green, since they do have ballot access, she would not have to worry about a rigged primary.
No, she just have to worry about a rigged general.
And she would need to run a campaign on dumping the corruption.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And she should run on the litmus test.
Exactly. If she ran on the litmus test, then she would get a lot more voters.
Yes, she would.
Because there's a lot of people, even on the right, who agree with dumping the corruption. And I have been talking with them. And I asked them, I say simply, why are you continuing voting for a party knowing that they take vast sums of corporate money and they're doing nothing for you?
In West Virginia, both the candidates of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are bought.
And you have somebody like Paula J. Swearingen coming in as a Green, not bought at all, packing receipts.
Yeah.
And if I were to run a campaign as, well, let's say right here in Georgia, let's say we do get ballot access and I get on the ballot as a Green, I would publish on my website the two parties and where their money come from the last cycle.
Yeah.
I would publish that on a campaign website and have open secrets right there. And I would say, dumping the corruption. Are you sure you want to vote for any of these two that's taken vast sums of money in their election cycles? Or do you want to vote for somebody that's like you, that will take care of the planet, take care of the people on the planet?
Yeah, I think it's appeals like that eventually we'll be able to end the system.
Mm-hmm. We've got to end the corrupt system that does not work for us. What I would like to have is a system that works for the many, not the few. We need more people like Jeremy Corbyn over here.
We sure do.
And I think that's all I can add for tonight's show. And I thank you, Dee, for coming out. And I thank you, Joe, for coming out. Don't forget to go and subscribe to Around the World with Brandy and Dee. And subscribe to Joe Firestone of Joe Firestone Empowering Democracy. And Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell. And have a great night, everyone.
Yes, thank you, Greg, and good night,
And you
everyone.
have a great night too, Greg.